In Safe Hands. Stories from Leeds' pioneering hand transplant team. Coming up in this episode.
One of the things I'd said is, can I be a mum? How can I look after this wee boy? And I've always been quite dynamic and determined and pushy. I wanted my son to see that kind of mum, not the kind of mum who couldn't do. I just couldn't wait to thank the family. I couldn't wait to let them know that I was grateful. They needed to know that I was blessed and I knew it, and I wouldn't waste the opportunity and I wouldn't waste the hands. I climbed Kilimanjaro. That was a first. I'm going to Machu Picchu in June. That's another one. But would I have done it? Maybe. I think the biggest achievement for me is to know that I'm still me.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that goes behind the scenes at Leeds Teaching Hospital's NHS Trust to meet the staff and patients behind the UK's only hand transplant team. I'm Caroline Verdon, and across this series we are going to delve into it all with microsurgeons, physiotherapists, immunologists, psychologists and everyone in between to answer everything you could ever possibly want to know about this topic. In this episode, I'm joined by Corinne Hutton, who back in 2019 was the recipient of a double hand transplant. Corinne, your journey, am I right, started with a cough?
Yeah, that's literally it. I put up with my cough for a couple of weeks and I took myself off to the doctor. I'd already tried across the counter medicines and things, but knew at that point I needed an antibiotic and it had gone into my chest. So took myself off to the GP on the Friday afternoon to get that antibiotic and all would be good was the plan. The next day I was a bit worse. I phoned NHS 24 up here. I was on the phone to them for about 20 minutes and they, like me, felt that the antibiotic would kick in and it would be fine. But there was just something that obviously kept them on the line a wee bit. And at the 11th hour, they just suggested, look, why don't you just come up? So under protest, I went up to the hospital. It was a very warm day. I was feeling lightheaded and dizzy because I knew I had an infection. You know you've got a fever. So all of that pointed to the same thing. It all made sense. But in actual fact, I was dying. And when I got into NHS 24, I was just ushered straight into a room. And I guess they must have seen that I wasn't in a very good way. And I slipped into unconsciousness then. My body was shutting down. It'd gone into septic shock. The pneumonia that I had was mixing with strep A and was trying to kill me. The overreaction of sepsis was shutting down my vital organs.
It sounds like it was so quick as well.
Well, that's the thing. And also for me, I just fell asleep almost. So all the drama that then happens goes over my head and everybody else is left to deal with it. So I'm very aware of the conversation that my family had and I wasn't expected to survive the night. And I think that's been my biggest surprise, I suppose, with sepsis. It's just live or die in that overnight space usually.
And so when you woke up, what was going through your mind that moment?
The main focus is on how poorly you feel and how ill you are and what all the treatments that you're getting. I didn't realise I'd been flown down to Leicester on an emergency airplane, a medical airplane, and they'd found the machine that I needed down in Leicester, the ECMO machine. Basically, from a layman's point of view, it takes the blood from your body, chills it, and pumps it all back round again, giving my heart and my lungs a rest, I suppose. And I think that and Leicester are what saved my life, along with a very good team of people fighting hard for me in Paisley RH, who insisted it happen and didn't give up when I had literally no chance of living. Back in Paisley in ICU, every day I was told how fantastic I was, how much of a miracle worker I was, and how I was something special and Wonder Woman-like. And that was over and over again. I can't believe you've managed to get off that machine. I can't believe you've managed to survive this. You're really strong. How are you getting through this? And I'm not particularly big-headed, but it does. It does start to sink in a bit where you think, why me? Why was I saved? And why did I survive this? And what is it that's different about me? But what was to come later on fairly soon makes you realise you're just human.
And what came later on then, I suppose, was the conversation about your hands, and not just your hands, but your lower limbs as well.
Well, all the time it's going on, I'm on every life support machine there is. Everything's hooked up to a machine. I can do nothing for myself. And that is the main focus. But on the sidelines, my family were looking closely at my hands and my feet had gone, purple, then blue. My hands had gone pretty well black and solid. There was no flesh there. It was all crispy black charcoal. But my feet were changing quite a lot. And, once I'd got over, there was about 6 weeks of life-saving treatment and all these machines and getting off these machines that had to happen before they could even consider talking about the extremities.
Yeah.
Um, but after 6 weeks, then the focus changed a little bit, and it was deemed um, safe, I suppose, to try and focus on them a bit more. They moved me then to Glasgow Royal Infirmary, and they started to discuss how I was to lose my hands and my legs in 2-3 days. And it was a foregone conclusion to them, and clearly wasn't to me. So it was the biggest shock of my life to
Yeah.
lie there and listen to all that and hold it together, because I'm a big brave person and I'm a Wonder Woman, of course. At that point, it's rock bottom. You're feeling utterly useless and worthless and wondering if it was worth saving your life at all. I didn't know what I was going to be. I couldn't find a name for it. As it turns out, quadruple amputee is probably the right one, but all these thoughts going through my head. I didn't know what sepsis had been. I didn't know what blood poisoning was, and such a big learning curve. And all the time, you're alone, helpless, and useless.
Presumably, most people, if they were in your situation, wouldn't have a point of reference or somebody else that they knew who had been through something similar that you could then say, look how they're thriving now.
No,
Okay, there's something to look forward to. There's a light that it doesn't really exist, does it?
absolutely. There was one quadruple amputee who'd come to see my family, but she'd said she wouldn't come and see me because I'd want to punch her because she was doing so well. But I now know there's a lot of people. I would have loved to have seen somebody coping, just
Yeah.
coping. Um, and I made it, I suppose, my job to make sure that people could see that straight away and they had a bit of hope. And I would walk into hospital wards, um, you know, having made an attempt at doing my hair or my makeup or my dress or, my clothing, and just trying to make them realise that, you could be normal.
Yeah.
Not to make light of it. It is hard. It's very hard. And you certainly can't go in bragging about how well you're doing. But just to see somebody doing well would have made a massive difference to me.
Yeah. And how did you cope in terms of your thoughts about parenting and stuff at that point? Is you had a 4-year-old at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I voiced it. One of the things I'd said is, can I be a mum? How can I look after this wee boy? And I've always been quite dynamic and determined and pushy. I was always into challenges, and I lived. I was always pushing myself hard, and I wanted my son to see that kind of mum, not the kind of mum who couldn't do. Yeah, that really, really mattered. So I guess he's probably been the motivation all along.
So you had the news then that the decision had been made, you were going to become a quadruple amputee. And what was the process then from that information being given to that then becoming your reality?
Well, shock and horror, obviously, at first, and then defiance, probably a bit. Absolutely not. They've not even tried. There must be a better way. There must be somebody willing to try new things. And that's where we saw a second opinion and a third opinion. Um, and I suppose after that, realization sets in, and all these opinions were all the same. So at that point, your next best option is to find the best surgeon you possibly could to do it. But what goes through your head at that time is not what you think it should or would be. Though it certainly wasn't for me anyway. My first thought was, I'll never wear another flip flop, and I'll never feel my toes dangling in the water. Um, and it was a flippant remark at the time, nearly 11 years ago now. Um, but it's turned out to be probably the biggest thing that hurts me. I see people with flip flops on. I really could cry on the spot. It's such a big deal, but yet, I couldn't walk for a while. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to drive or ever be able to do things with my son. And yet you think about flip flop. Who knew?
I can kind of understand that. I think for me it would be the toes in the water. I love swimming.
Bare
I
feet.
love going to the
Yeah,
beach. I think I would really struggle with that. And you say it's just a small thing, but it's the pepperings of those small things that
yeah,
sort of give our life meaning in a way, isn't it? And enable us to be
definitely.
who we are. What was the process for you between being told, you are going to lose your hands and then being given a hand transplant?
Well, in between this, there was always the debate about whether it's worse to lose your legs or your hands, and of course, I'd lost both.
Yeah.
Um, I was pretty quick to get prosthetics legs, and I was pretty quick to get on my legs and walk. And I worked very hard at that, and I did all the physio I was supposed to do, and all these silly wee exercises that turn out to be so important. I can now fool people no problem if I don't show them. My walking is very good, but at that point you start to realise how clever your hands are, and how much you can't do without them, or how much you um, use other um, parts of your body probably
Yeah.
to help you. My teeth took a real kicking from opening bottles and tying shoelaces and pulling zips and things with my teeth. Was never a great idea, but you've got no choice
Yeah.
at the time. And my stumps were such that they had limited use. But I did learn to do a lot of things. I got prosthetic hands as well. I got cosmetic ones that I thought I wanted and really needed. And the minute I wore them, realised I was more paralysed with them. They don't do anything. They just look real, or they look almost real.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, I went to a party wearing them and I couldn't raise my glass. So at that point, they were ditched. I could raise my glass with my stumps, but I couldn't do it with the hands. So at that point, you realise how much function is more important than aesthetics. My hands looked particularly bad. They didn't look like nice, tidy stumps. Prof had saved me, half a bone in my thumbs that was good for pressing buttons, working a phone, that sort of thing. Very practical, clever things, but they looked pretty horrendous. They were very noticeable, and they're out there a lot more for you to see. They're not tucked inside shoes and things. They're out there to be seen. So there was a lot of attention on the way they looked, a lot of stares and extra glances. So I had to get used to that. There was no way around that. But Prof had wanted me to go and talk to Leeds about hand transplants, and he'd saved a lot of viable things in my arms, a lot of veins and nerves and things that might otherwise just have been cut short. He'd saved them with a view to perhaps being a hand transplantee. And he asked me to go and talk to Leeds about it. And I was quite against it at the time. I felt I'd been through so many operations, and I had this view that my immune system had let me down. And I really didn't want to consider an operation whereby I was on immune suppressants for the rest of my life. I'd heard about the dangers. A lot of people were keen to tell me about the dangers. But above all, I felt I owed Prof the chance to talk about it. So I thought I'll go down and I'll listen. I went down with my dad, and I remember clearly walking into this room with maybe 50 odd people in it, like an amphitheatre. And I thought they must be discussing dozens of cases today. But every single one of them that was there to discuss me and my hands. It was such a big discussion.
Yeah.
So many different angles from it. They had to be sure of the immune suppressants. They had to be sure of the effect it would have on my kidneys and, all your other vital organs. And there were so many people involved, and they were all discussing me. So the scale of it surprised me, and the excitement of the people that I met rubbed off on me. I did have to go back a second and third time. And all the time, I suppose in that first meeting, I realised that there was no decision to be made yet for me. They had to accept me, first of all. I had to be the right patient for them. So it seemed to me there was no decision to make at all. I'll just go along for the ride and see if they accept me. If they accept me, then I've got a decision to make. And it just grew on me, the excitement of them and what they felt they could do for me. Obviously, they can't make big promises, but even their subdued promises sounded fantastic. And, why wouldn't you try to fix things that are broken? Why wouldn't you give it a go? And I started to listen and learn a bit more about the operation and what would be involved. And they put me through a lot of tests that were like IQ tests. So that was like a holiday for me. I love puzzles. I love all these things. So look at me, I'm coming down here for a little play. I now realise the extent that they're looking at your psyche to see how strong you are and how much you're going to try and work out these puzzles. That became obvious after getting my hands, how much puzzle solving there was to do to get them to work and to get them to do what you wanted them to do. It was a huge process. So it just gradually worked on me until I thought, this is silly. Why would I not do this? And when they accepted me, I accepted them all at the same time, really. And I was put onto the organ donation list at that point, or the hand transplant list at that point.
And what
Um,
was the reaction of friends and family?
I think by then most people had come along for the ride with me. They knew how it was going. They knew they could see me getting more pro hands. Um, my mum will always worry about everything, and if there's nothing to worry about, she'll worry about that. So I probably didn't pay a lot of attention to her nerves. That they're always going to be negative and worry and anti-risk. My brothers are quite pushy and determined, so go try and get it fixed. The lawyer brother's probably a wee bit more conservative, so he was asking and listening to medical people who were warning. But ultimately, we felt that the benefits outweighed the potential risks.
For me, having spoken when we've recorded this podcast to so many different people with different backgrounds, all about hands, it's become so obvious to me how important hands are. And not just in a can I open a bottle, can I make dinner, but in so many other areas of life that you just don't even think about, business meetings. Well, you shake a hand, hello, and you play games with kids, and they're often peekaboo or hiding behind your hands. And there are so
Mhm.
many tiny little things that hold actually such socially significant values behind
Yeah.
them. At the point that you sort of made that decision of, yes, right, I'm going for it. Were there any things in particular that you were thinking, I can't wait to do X again?
I think it was probably all function. Mostly it's function, getting them to do the things that you couldn't do or were difficult. But I hadn't thought about the emotional parts of it. I hadn't thought about the fact that for nearly 5 years, I couldn't hold my son's hand. He held my arm. Um, you couldn't safely help him across the road. You couldn't fluff his hair. You couldn't pinch his cheek. Just lots of emotional things that you think aren't terribly important, and look at me welling up thinking about them. They were so important. Intimacy things, just hugs and, touching and feeling the amount of things people would say, I'll feel that. And I couldn't. I couldn't tell what was a nice material. I couldn't tell what was a rough material. I couldn't tell hots and colds and things. There's a huge amount to hands. And I think a lot of it is down to that touch and feel, isn't it?
And when you were making the the decision, how much thought did you give to the physicality of your new hands? Because there are lots of questions about what will you
Yeah.
accept and what do you think you would be comfortable with?
Yeah, there was. And I am always trying to do the right thing and not be insulting. I was trying very hard not to be ageist and sexist and racist and all these things. And I'd said, whatever you think, really. But, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, what if this is, some 6'4" guy, black with tattoos? And, they're not going to blend in. I have no racism in me, but then you're not going to forget that there's somebody else's, are you? You're going to be constantly reminded of it. But fortunately, that was never my decision. Well, I suppose it probably could have been my decision had I wanted it to, but I left it entirely up to them. And they were a lot more strict about what would match
Yeah.
than I was. So I quickly backed off and realised they were trying very hard to get the perfect match. And they absolutely are. They're so like my old hands. It's bizarre.
So, when it comes to thinking about the donor, obviously they'd passed away and it was their family who then had that final say on, yes, we'd like to donate their hands to someone who needs them. But when it comes to the psychological aspects of thinking about your donor and the donor family, Are there any tips or is there any advice or rules that are given to you pre-surgery?
Yeah, there is. There's ethical rules and what you can and can't expect, and it has to be two sided. If they don't want to meet you, then you can't meet them. So it has to be both parties want to be involved. And I just couldn't wait to thank the family. I couldn't wait to let them know that I was grateful. I wanted that to be urgent. They needed to know that I was blessed and I knew it, and I wouldn't waste the opportunity and I wouldn't waste the hands. I needed them to know that really, really quickly. But if they decided they didn't want to see me, then that is one of those things. But yeah, it started off just with a letter to say how grateful I was and how I was happy to go along with whatever they wanted, if they wanted to meet me or not, if they wanted to touch them or not. All of these things were fine with me. I just wanted them to know I was grateful.
And do you have thoughts about, I wonder if these hands have gardened before? I wonder if these hands have painted before or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I do a bit. The I never ever think about my hands without thinking about the donor. Never ever is there a discussion where the thought doesn't go through your head. So I'm always aware of it constantly, and I make sure I remember birthdays and Christmases and things, and always reach out to say I've not forgotten. I also asked about what the hands were used to doing, kind of hopeful that they didn't play the fiddle or crochet or something like that. And unfortunately, that I was saved from that. They like to drink wine and sing karaoke, apparently. So I'd already ticked those boxes, no problem. So yeah, we trying to keep it light-hearted. I constantly think, knowing what I know about the donor, um, I'm probably a lot more pushy and determined, so they're probably getting into a lot more trouble than they ever did. In a light-hearted way, but in a serious way. You can't be excited and grateful about them without thinking about the life the rest of the families are going through, and what they're missing, so that you can have that. I'm always aware of it, and
And
I've got standards that I must keep up. The nails are always polished and looked after.
would you have done that previously?
I was probably always aware and tried to keep them tidy, but my nails were dreadful. They were really, really dreadful. And now they're great, and it's much easier to. So,
Yeah. And
um,
what sort of relationship do you have with the donor's family? So you wrote the letter, and am I right that first of all it sort of goes into a holding space, if you like, and then if the donor family want to reach out, they can do so.
I think they're
You know,
told it's there, and they thankfully were very similar to me. They maybe helped them a bit, and after a period, it was arranged and we met up, and that was odd but necessary. If they wanted it, then it was absolutely necessary. Then we were going ahead with it. And after that, one of the family members was particularly keen to stay in touch, and you wonder then, like, oh, what have I got into here? But couldn't be more considerate, couldn't be more helpful and friendly. And I made a video one time about how I could pick my nose or something. Something stupid. Look how lucky I am. And there's a little bit of a backlash from someone who said I was ungrateful. But I'd spoken to the family and said, I'm really sorry, it was only meant as a joke. And they'd said, these are your hands now. You do what you want with them. It's entirely up to you what you do with them. You don't need to answer to us. And I was very grateful for that. And I don't feel I need to answer to them, but I would never be disrespectful.
no.
I'd never go out my way to disrespect them either. So hopefully they can see just how much good I'm doing with them, and how much I appreciate them.
And you were talking about how one of the things that you really missed was being able to ruffle your son's hair and hold his hand and keep him safe as you cross the road. What was your son's reaction to your new hands?
He's quite a practical kid. So there's not a huge amount of emotion goes in there. It's just tell him the facts. He processes it. He copes with it. So I never saw him all the time. I was down in Leeds, which was 3 weeks. So I never saw him then, but we were able to do Zoom calls and things and FaceTimes. So at least we saw him then, and I knew he was being looked after and everything. So he knew all along, right from losing my hands, to be honest. We've been quite honest. One of the nurses told me you can't hide them from the truth. So we always took the opinion that we should be honest, but we maybe don't need to know all the gory
Everything.
details, but
Yeah.
we can be honest with him. So he always knew the story. He knew I went to Leeds. He knew it was a bit frightening that I'd gone and that we wouldn't see each other. But that this was a positive. This was to improve. This was to make me better. So yeah, he was always behind that. And when I come home, there was a nice big welcome for me, and he was interested to know about them. But all along, really, there's never been a pedestal from Rory at all. You've just been mum,
Yeah.
which is exactly what you'd want. You know, you don't
Yeah.
want to be the amount of people that will say to him, you must be so proud. And he looks at them like they've got horns. Why? Why must I be? Because it's life for him. You just got on with it. And that's all I wanted was just to be normal mum.
Yeah. And
So,
are there
yeah.
things that you've been able to do with him since that you wouldn't have before? I'm guessing Rory would have been about 9 when you had the transplant.
He's a wee bit older than that, 10, yeah,
10.
10 he was, yeah. Yeah, by which time he doesn't want to hold your hand, and doesn't want you ruffling his hair and things, Is there things I've been able to do? There are definitely things I've been able to do better. Like I used to be able to ride a bike, but had a prosthetic hand that attached me to the bike. And it was
Okay.
all about quite a big palaver, where now I can jump on a bike and cycle it normally. Um, I'm able to help him. There was a lot of things I couldn't do. Like the kid had a cut, I couldn't put a plaster on it. The kid had a scalp, I couldn't help him with it. There was a lot of things that you just feel a bit disabled with, where now these options are manageable, and I could do it again. Probably just about the point he can start to do it himself. It's funny how when I come back from having the hands and stopped wearing the splints and things, how normal you look, which is, I guess, what I wanted, but how quickly you're demoted, where nobody offered to help me. In a supermarket and things, I was always quite obvious and people would offer to help all the time, where suddenly I had hands and if I had a jumper on, nobody could see the scars. So nobody offered you any help at all. You didn't get any sympathy at all. It was quite a change, and I would laugh at that. Never ever wanted sympathy, but I was a quadruple amputee then. I wasn't. So yeah. Um, I lost my position.
So are there things that you think that's a goal of something I'm going to get myself into a position that I can do?
Not so much now. I think I've probably challenged myself on everything that was important to me. We had a conversation about golf the other day. I used to be able to golf, and now the club moves in my hands. But then golf isn't that important to me, and I haven't tried to learn it. So if somebody said to me my life depends on going golfing, then I would push them and they'd learn. But I've pretty much got through the list of everything I wanted to do, and I've pushed them. Then you start to think, God, am I being a bit laid back with them now? Am I not pushing them hard enough?
And I guess that things must come more instinctively.
Yes, a lot of it. The touch and feel. There's a slight delay. I realise now. So if I hold something for every moment, I can work out what it is with my eyes closed, obviously. I can work out what I'm holding. I can work out straight away, I know if it's hot or cold, and I know if it's sharp. So I can probably tell metal things from plastic things, that sort of thing. But what is that I'm holding? It just takes a wee delayed reaction to think, what is that? What part of my hand is it touching? We play a wee game of somebody touching my hand, and I've got to guess which finger it is they're touching, and is it the outside or the inside? And there's a percentage of the time, probably that 20% that I get wrong. And you realise that nerve endings split into two fingers, and they can get confused,
Yeah.
or there's a delay just in thinking, wait a minute, just give me a minute, it'll come, and it's just the neurological paths all opening up and catching up. Um, so I would like that to be better. I get mad when it's not better, but they are fantastic.
You strike me as a person who sets a goal and then just smashes it. Like that's the goal. I'm going to achieve it.
Well, I wanted the hands to work. I wanted them to work as best as they could. I wanted them to do everything for me. So without necessarily consciously setting goals, I just wanted them to do everything they could. And I wasn't an angel, but I had to bully myself to put my right hand behind my back and use my left, because I'm so dominant with my right hand, and I'm so right-handed in mentality. So I had to really bully myself to do that, and it was the only way it was going to work. is to try. So yes, I do have that pushy mentality, and yes, I suppose I have probably unconscious goals.
And
Uh,
do you think that's helped, that sort of positive head forward attitude?
I think so. I think Leeds might say the same if they were comparing. I quite often think I should have done more. I could have done more when I was sitting watching the telly. I could have done things, I could always have tried harder, but I know I did a lot. I know I pushed them hard. I knew it meant a lot to me, and I wanted them to work. I know I pushed them probably as hard as I could. And they know that as well. So I think between us, we've got the results we wanted with their brilliant surgery and their brilliant therapies and my determination and just making sure that I use them all day, every day.
Are there things that you've achieved since you became unwell that you wouldn't have achieved otherwise?
Well, hard to say. As I said, I always pushed myself, I always did challenges, and I've kept that up. So, like, I climbed Kilimanjaro. That was a first. I'm going to Machu Picchu in June. That's another one. But would I have done it? Maybe. Maybe. I think the biggest achievement for me is to know that I'm still me, and that I've pushed to get me back. Not that me is perfect or anything like it. I do sometimes think I should have perhaps come back kinder or nicer or less cheeky. But in actual fact, I'm still me, and yeah, I'm kind of proud of that. Really, that took a bit of work as well. And being me means pushing yourself and doing things and living.
Coming up on our next episode, we meet Professor Simon Kay. He's a world-leading authority on hand transplants, and he set up the team in Leeds in 2013.
Ever since Friends, the sitcom series, there seems to have been a sort of wave across the Western world of hugging, not shaking hands. But the point about shaking hands is when you shake somebody's hands, you feel them and you have to look them in the face. My children will tell you that I like to shake hands with them rather than hug them because it's just a telling way to say hello and how are you. You get a lot of information very quickly.
And you can hear our episode with Professor Simon Kay on the 30th of October. This podcast is an Under the Mast studio production.